Today I'm going to teach you how to make this pretty and practical fully lined fabric bowl cover. This is a beginner-friendly project that is perfect for gift giving and will add a little pizzazz to your next potluck. If you stay to the end, I have a top tip for you on how this cover solves a very annoying problem. So let's get right into it. For this project, you will need the bowl that you are designing your cover for, your main fabric and your lining fabric. I am using nylon for my lining, but you could use a coordinating fabric if you like. Both of these fabrics should measure about 4 inches larger than the diameter of your bowl. You'll need a measuring device, a marking tool, scissors or rotary cutter and mat, elastic, pins or clips, paper, and a bodkin or safety pin for feeding the elastic through a casing. Pinking shears are optional. You will also need a sewing machine and thread. I will leave a supply list and timestamps in the description box below. For an easy way to cut a perfect smooth circle that is just the size I want, I am going to use some easy math to create a template. First, you're going to want to measure your bowl from edge to edge. This is the diameter. My bowl measures 9.5 inches. Then you want to account for the seam allowance you will be using. I will be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this project. Then you want to have your casing and room for the fabric to drape over the edge. I have found that I like 3 inches. To keep the math simple, what we will need for our measurement for our template is 1/2 of the diameter of our bowl plus a seam allowance and the amount we want for our casing and to drape over the sides of the bowl. For today's project, my diameter is 9.5 inches. I will use 1/2 of the diameter, which is 4.75 inches, plus the 1/2 inch seam allowance, plus 3 inches for my drape and casing. So that gives me 8.25 inches as the measurement I will be using for building my template. Now we're going to use the easy math measurement of 8.25 inches to draw our template. I have my heavy stock paper and my ruler, and I'm going to come up from the left-hand corner 8.25 inches and make a dot. And then I'm going to come around here from the left corner to the right 8.25 inches and make a dot. I'm going to anchor my ruler end at the left corner point, and I'm going to make an arc between these 2 points at 8.25 inches all the way around this curve, being sure that I keep this corner anchored and make my dots. Now I'm going to make enough dots like this that I can connect the dots for my cutting line. I'll connect these dots and then cut out my template. Here's a template I've already cut out, and I've labeled it so that I know the next time I want to cut out a bowl cover that this template will work for a bowl that measures 9.5 inches in diameter. Now let's cut out our fabric. I have my 19-inch square piece of quilting cotton. Since we're working in quarters, I'm going to fold this in half, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. I have the folded edges along the bottom and along the left side, and the open 4 layers are along the top and the right. I'm going to take my template and I'm going to place it on the corner of my fabric. I find it's helpful if I clip this down or add pattern weights or any heavy object to keep it secure while I cut it out with my rotary cutter. I'm going to use my rotary cutter to cut around the template. And there you go. See what a nice round circle you get where the curves are pretty smooth? I'm going to cut out my lining and then I'll meet you back here for the next step. I have my main fabric in my lining, right sides together, and I've pinned all the way around with my clips. You'll notice that I have different color clips here. That's to remind myself to leave a 2-inch opening. We're going to need that opening to turn our project right side out and also for feeding our elastic through. I'm going to start here and I will back tack to secure. I'm going to go all around the cover and end here, back tack to secure. I'm going to head to my sewing machine, then I'll meet you back here. I have my cover pieces sewn together. You'll see I took the optional step of trimming the seam allowance in half with Bodkin shears. You don't have to do that. I find it gives a little bit neater finish. Now I'm going to reach my hand inside and I'm going to turn this cover right side out. I'm getting my hand in there and just really push out that seam. You can use a blunt object to do that. It depends on how big of a hole you leave as to what you want to stick in there. I have small hands, so that hole was fine for me to get my whole hand in there. Now I'm going to take this to the ironing board. I'm going to give it a little bit of a press, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how I roll the seams to get a really great finish. So I'll be right back. I gave my cover a really quick press, and now I'm going to roll my seams and clip them to help set the seam a little bit. This does not take much time, and this nylon that I'm using really wants to roll nicely. So I just take my fingers, roll the seam to get it to lie nicely, and then put a little clip in to set it. This is not something that you have to do, but I find that it gives a little bit rounder, smoother curve to my project. I'm going to work my way around the bowl cover. I'm going to tuck in where I left the gap, and then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew the casing at a 1/2 inch. I'm not going to close my opening until the end because I need that for feeding my elastic. So I'm going to finish rolling my seam, put in my 1/2 inch casing, and I'll meet you back here. I have sewn my casing. The thread matches so well it's hard to see from the right side, but I've gone all the way around. I still have my opening here, which I pressed in with the memory crease so that it's easy to sew when I'm finished. So now it's time to feed the elastic. I'm using 1/4 inch elastic. Some people will measure the circumference of their bowl and then subtract 2 inches and cut their elastic to that length. But I have found that I waste elastic that way because I need less than what that measurement is just by the stretchiness of my elastic. So what I tend to do is keep the elastic attached to the spool as I feed it through. And then as I see how much it gathers in my cover, I determine when to cut my elastic and attach it. So to thread the elastic through, you can use a bodkin or a safety pin. Let me know in the comments below if you're team bodkin or team safety pin. I prefer the bodkin. So I'm going to attach it to my elastic. If you've not used a bodkin before, it is a clamp with a little metal slider, and as you push it towards the head, it opens up, and you can clamp it down on the elastic and then push the slider through, and it's really secure. I prefer the bodkin because I've had the safety pins open up on me while I've been feeding through and then had to start over again, or they've snagged the fabric. And also this gives me a nice firm feed. So I'm going to start feeding through My cover, insert it in. I'm going to feed it through. Then I'm going to meet you at the sewing machine when I join the elastic. Joining elastic can be one of the more fiddly sewing tasks, and I have found a little trick to help it go more smoothly. So I'm going to finish feeding this through, and I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Joining elastic can be very fiddly, where it wants to separate underneath the presser foot. So what I have done is I've pulled my elastic out for generous space, and I have overlapped my elastic by about 1 inch. And I have put a pin in like so. Let me see if you can see it up closely. Now I'm going to put it underneath my presser foot. I've got a scrap piece of tracing paper that I'm going to put underneath the presser foot so that the elastic does not get pulled down into the throat plate. I have my machine set on a lightning stitch. I'm going to lower my presser foot, and I'm going to keep this pin in for most of the time as I'm sewing, but I'm going to slowly pull it back. I have the head of the pin facing towards me. I'm going to slowly pull it back so that I don't run over my pin. Let me slow down my machine and get started. So I pulled it back a little bit. And as I sew, I'm just pulling it back, and that pin is really holding these elastic pieces nicely on top of each other. Alternative method is you could take an awl and hold your elastic with this. I've got them joined. I pulled out a little more elastic than what I needed, but it's worth it to not have the aggravation joining it. For deciding the elastic amount, I used my eyeball and how many gathers I had as to how much elastic to use. I cut my elastic, and then I pulled it out of the casing so I could tell you how much I actually used. The circumference of my bowl was about 30 inches where the wrap and the elastic will sit on the bowl. I cut out 23 inches and tested it. It fits nicely. So had I used the rule of thumb of 2 inches less than the circumference, I would have wasted about 6 or 7 inches of elastic. So I'm going to clean up my threads. I'm going to close this up. I've switched back over to a straight stitch. We had our memory crease. I'm going to close my gap, and then we're going to try this on our bowl and see how it looks. Didn't this bowl cover turn out pretty? I love to give pretty and practical handmade gifts. Let me know in the comments below if you're going to make a bowl cover. If you've liked this video, please consider subscribing and liking. Now, I did promise a top tip if you stay till the end. My top tip is that I use a fabric bowl cover on top of my cheesecake pan. When I slide it in the refrigerator, it no longer forms a puddle of condensation on top of my cheesecake. You're welcome. If you liked this video, I have more tutorials that I'll link in the end card with a playing list for sewing gifts. I will be adding new tutorial videos over the next several weeks. Until next time, I hope you have a joyful week and that you find the good in all things, especially sewing. Bye.